Greetings to all. I, Animesh Upadhyay, am back with another episode of Off the Desk by the Law Culture. The theme of this episode is contemplating the jurisdiction of courts in criminal cases, interstate tussle, cause of action, and the involvement of CBI. To discuss on the same, we have with us an eminent guest and one of the legal doyens of India, Mr. Siddharth Luthra, sir. Sir is a senior advocate at Supreme Court of India. Currently, Sir is regarded as the best criminal law practitioner in India. He has served as Additional Solicitor General of India from 2012 to 2014 and has been teaching in multiple law universities both in India and in United Kingdom. Sir, it's an honor to have you with us, and we thank you for sparing time for us from your extremely busy schedule.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
So, without any further ado, sir, can you please take our viewers through the judgment of the Apex Court in Ria Chakrabarti versus State of Bihar, with emphasis on the technicalities involved? For instance, on what basis did the court opine that Bihar courts had jurisdiction over the matter, and what was the need to pass an order under Article 142 of Constitution by the Apex Court instead of a general order?
Animesh, the matter arises out of a transfer petition which is filed, and that transfer petition was under section 406 of the CRPC.
Yes.
As you are well aware, that section 406 CRPC talks about transfer of cases and not of investigations. It has to be transfer of a case or a pending proceeding. It is not an investigation. Investigations are at the pre-case stage. They can be transferred either under 226 or under 32 as the case may be. Now, in this case, in the Ria Chakrabarti, Sushant Singh Rajput case, all these cases, two interesting things happened. One, the Supreme Court got a view or took a view that the police did not seem to be, Maharashtra police did not seem to be
Yes.
investigating expeditiously. In fact, they observed that the Maharashtra police has expanded the scope of the inquest under 174 CRPC, but has not registered an FIR yet. That's part one. Part two, the Bihar police, Patna, registers an FIR on the ostensible ground that there are breach of trust or misappropriate issues which have to be accounted for at Patna. Now, I'm not very satisfied with the logic given by the Patna police, but the fact is that there is the ability of a police agency, especially after the Lalita Kumari Constitution Bench decision in 2014, to register an FIR, and such an FIR, if there is a cognizable offense, disclosed, and the ground that jurisdiction is doubtful is not enough to decline to register an FIR. That is the second aspect that the court deals with. Orderly in practice, these are termed zero FIRs, registered as zero FIRs, and then transferred to the correct place of jurisdiction. Having said that, while the court was concerned with the legal issue, there obviously seems to be a political catfight between Maharashtra and Bihar, the way it was opposed. And then you have the Solicitor General who comes out with a solution and says, look, there seems to be a conflict, please send it to CBI. You must also remember that Patna police had already, Bihar police had already said, let CBI investigate. Now, that is where the matter rests. Was it a case for CBI investigation? I believe not, except perhaps that the concession made by the Solicitor General, the view given by the Solicitor General, who said that avoid both states and send it to CBI. So it became a kind of compromise formula, kind of panchayati situation, and no more. Having said that, my view is that the case throws up some interesting issues. One is the manner in which investigations are getting transferred to CBI. And in my view, CBI was not meant for this. CBI was meant for specialized crimes. CBI was meant for international crimes, interstate crimes where one police, or where there's a doubt as to the fairness of investigation you may get from a certain police agency. So that was the whole purpose of CBI, which is supposed to be a specialized investigating agency. Having said that, the reasoning of the court about the reasoning not of the court, but the reasoning of the Patna police on the misappropriation ground, as I said, seems to be very stretched. But they did register the FIR, and the FIR was making some headway. Add to that the uh, delay on the part of the Maharashtra police in acting, in registering an FIR. After all, a person had died. Now, you can't extend the 174 inquest to make it supplant the FIR. So these issues led to the matter. It was ideal that the matter should have been perhaps transferred out of Maharashtra if there were certain political overtones which we read about in the newspaper all the time. But from what I understand of the judgment, transferring to CBI, though suggested, though already done, because it was already pending with CBI. So rather not transferring to CBI, but allowing the CBI to continue with the investigations was perhaps not something which the court was determining, but only allowing what had already taken place. Having said that, there's another important issue. Riya Chakrabarti was ostensibly in the nature of an accused, as we know now she's been arrested. So a subsidiary principle that was discussed in that case was whether a person who is an accused can choose an investigating agency. The answer is clearly no. But a person who is an accused can always question the prejudice and ask for a fair investigation. The right to a fair investigation was settled in the Constitution Bench decision in 2010 in the state of West Bengal case, where in para 71, para 68, if I recall correctly, 68 Roman 2, it's made very clear that Article 21 encompasses the right to a free and fair investigation. Now, though that is in the context of a victim, but surely an accused is also entitled to a free and fair investigation. That principle has been taken further in the three-judge bench in Vinubai, Justice Nariman's judgment, where he says you can't have long-winded investigations which never end, and there must be a checkpoint. So he's put the checkpoint at the stage of consideration of charge. But these are all views that have already encompassed. The fact is, in this case, the Supreme Court has allowed the CBI to continue and said, let CBI investigate every aspect of the matter. So that's where we stand.
Correct, sir.
One more thing I must say, since we're on this. Where did the offense of suicide or death, unnatural death, take place?
Yes.
So the primary jurisdiction was with Maharashtra. Maharashtra should have acted. Maharashtra should have registered the FIR. If they didn't, it leads oneself to a doubt as to the fairness of the investigative processes there. And perhaps that is the reason for this order of the Supreme Court.
Right, sir. So, can you briefly take us through the mechanism? In what circumstances a case can be handed over to the CBI?
Okay. The CBI operates under the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. As you are well aware, there is a doubt. I don't know if that there's a doubt as to the existence of the CBI and its legitimacy. So the Guwahati High Court took a view against, saying that the CBI can't claim to be the DSP with a new name. It is its constitution was challenged and questioned by the Guwahati High Court, and the matter has stayed in the Supreme Court since 2014. We have not seen the light of the day of that petition for a very long time. And the CBI is actually continuing to operate in terms of an interim order of the Supreme Court. But having said that, the CBI operates under the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act of 1946. It is essentially a federal agency, and unlike federal agencies in the US, it is a body which operates in union territories and not in states, because to operate in a state under the provisions of the DSP Act, it requires both the approval of the center. Center has to have, say, this is the scope of its investigation, and the state has to give consent. The only exception to that rule is when the High Court or the Supreme Court, the High Court under 226 or the Supreme Court under Article 32, directs the CBI to take over an investigation. In that case, the provisions of the DSP Act will not stand in the way of the CBI investigating an offense. Ordinarily, normal cases of those CBI, ordinarily normal cases of hurt, injury, murder are not taken over by CBI. Though, because initially the CBI or the DSPA was constituted to look after corruption in the post-war years. That's the reason for the 1946 Act, and that's the purpose. And then you had contemporaneously the Prevention of Corruption Act 1947, along with some provisions in the IPC which dealt with corruption, section 161 to 165 capital A of the IPC, as it then was. That gets modified in the 60s. And in 1988, we have a brand new PC Act. In the year, now we again have a brand new PC Act in the year 2018. Now, PC Act, Prevention of Corruption, is the primary focus of the CBI. However, it has two more sets of rules. One, that it looks after international relationships. So, for example, the National Central Bureau of the Interpol is operated by CBI. CBI is the local agency, and therefore all the interaction with the Interpol takes through CBI. Also, CBI is the agency to deal with international crime, though not narcotics and others, though they have the jurisdiction to do it, NCB also does. So CBI is like an equivalent to the FBI, though it is the body which really interacts for international crime. It's supposed to be a more professional organization with people from all cadres, the best of the best, as they call it. Having said that, the CBI also has what is known as the Special Crimes Branch. So there's Anti-Corruption, ACB, and Special Crimes Branch, and now Information Technology, Cybercrime, and all of that. So all of those are add-ons to the CBI's original purpose. Ordinarily, cases go to the CBI by in the Union Territories, the CBI's parallel jurisdiction. There's the judgment of the Supreme Court, I think 1973, A.C. Sharma, which judgment has been affirmed in the Subramanian Swamy versus Union of India Constitution Bench decision of 2014. The second mechanism is when the state, as in this case, or in any case, pushes a matter to the CBI. So you will often find that the state agencies say, let this case be investigated by CBI because we believe that this requires a certain expertise, or we believe there are interstate ramifications, or we believe that there will be political interference at some point or other interference, and the right to a fair investigation may come in question. So better that an external agency does it. For that, then the center has to give consent, and only when the two consents, approval and consent, take place, can the investigation be done. The third mechanism I've told you is by way of a writ petition. There is no other mechanism known to law. CBI investigates in rare cases. It neither has the infrastructure nor is it supposed to have, because its resources, as I said, are spread all over India. I'll give you a classic example. When I was the Additional Solicitor General and the case of Sarda group of companies, the chit fund companies, came up, I was asked by the Director of CBI to represent, and Justice Thakur, as he then was, before he became Chief Justice, asked me, he says, what do we do about this matter? Are you willing as CBI to take it on? And I had to tell him, I said, you must understand, our hands are full. This is a case of interstate ramifications, yes. So we do such cases of interstate ramifications, there is no doubt. That's within our jurisdiction or our parameters of consideration. However, we do not have the wherewithal. So if you want us to do is tell the state police to support us and give us administrative infrastructure and even police support as and when we require it. It is on those conditions that the case was transferred, because it was a case of interstate ramifications. Now, this is a case of really individual issues and not interstate ramifications. But since the Bihar government had sent it to CBI and CBI was investigating, it seemed logical to the Supreme to let CBI continue and to avoid any controversy about which police authority does or does not have jurisdiction, and to ensure that there is a level of fairness.
Right, sir. The issue of media trial is on national discourse today. Media trial often subjugates or compromises the investigation by agencies. This compromise often leads to weakening of prosecution case, thus leading to acquittal. So, what, according to you, should be measures or regulation to ensure non-compromise of such prosecution?
I had appeared in the year 2011, I had appeared in the Sahara case, where I was very concerned about the abuses of rights that take place as a consequence of media trial. There can be, as you have rightly pointed out, two sets of abuses. One is the prosecution can be compromised. Secondly, the privacy and the rights of the accused can be shattered, as you would appreciate. Both are equally grave. Having said that, I must also share with you that there is another concern, and that is that media trial will not stop because self-regulation has failed. Please appreciate, the Press Council is essentially a toothless body, number one. Number two, just give me a moment. The Cable Television Act has provisions under the cable television rules, but these are very weak provisions. Well, they are actually strong provisions, but rarely used. So in that sense, they are weak. Then you have the OTT platforms of the internet. That is regulated only by the Information Technology Act, because we don't believe in pre-disclosure regulation or pre-disclosure censorship. So if you look at all of this, coupled with the fact that commercial interests drive the media's self-regulation has failed because the desire to have TRPs has taken over. How much? You can read two newspapers or watch two channels and you'll be given completely opposite sides of a case. And the level of intrusion is, according to me, excessive and not appropriate at this stage. Therefore, I would believe that we need to relook at how fair our procedures are. Now, the Sahara case was an attempt to provide, restraint orders against publication, and that's the Constitution Bench decision. But those orders are rarely given. We need to have a stronger mechanism whereby prosecutors who leak information, or prosecutors, remember the Bombay blast, you had the media shouting from the top of the buildings as to what's happening and what operations are taking place, and we lost so many more lives of police officers and security personnel. Is that fair or justified? And that's a question we need to ask. According to me, we have to ensure that there is least prejudice to the accused, to the victim, and to the prosecution as a result of media reporting, and there should be no media trial. Having said that, media does a good job at times in raising issues where parties are complicit and individuals don't get rights. But we need to ensure that the criminal justice system is fairer, because for a society to be considered as a civilized society, one of the important things is that the criminal justice system must protect the rights of all those who come within its ambit.
Right, sir. So, can you explain as to which court can have jurisdiction in offences like criminal breach of trust, which are continuing in nature?
So the classic case for this is the 1951 Bombay case and a judgment of the Delhi High Court in Dilip Pendse's case. Breach of trust is an interesting offense. It's not just a continuing offense, but there's another element. So the place where the articles are entrusted will have jurisdiction. The place where, if the demand is made, and the place where they have to be accounted for. So the place where the refusal takes place will have jurisdiction, and where you have to account for them. So for example, I'll give you a classic case. Many years ago, there was a case in Bombay which came to Delhi. And we were looking at whether Delhi would have jurisdiction. And then relying on the 1951 Bombay decision, we were able to argue that because the registered office of the company was in Delhi, though majority of the acts took place in Maharashtra, because the registered office was in Delhi, and that is where the directors of the company and the officials of the company have to account for the amounts entrusted to them. Hence, it was very clear that Delhi would have jurisdiction. So 181 subsection 4, section 181 CRPC subsection 4 provides where jurisdiction is provided. You will have jurisdictional provision from 177 onwards, but 181.4, if I recall correctly, specifically deals with breach of trust.
Right, sir. So, what do you think is the biggest impediment in the course of criminal cases?
That's a tough one. I think the lack of scientific investigations. In the Nirbhaya case, we had a scientific investigation, so you got your conviction very fast. There are systemic delays. There is the media onslaught. There is the public glare and the public perception, which leads to unnecessary intervention or interference with individual rights. And I believe Article 21, which is the hallmark, the procedural requirements, is totally neglected. It is, according to me, very important that there be a relook at the procedures. The courts have also diluted the procedures a lot to ensure that convictions don't fail. But that is not what is required, because Article 21 says procedure established by law, and that procedure has to be just, fair and reasonable. If you start diluting the safeguards under the CRPC or other procedural laws, then how will that procedure be just, fair, or reasonable? So these are some of the problems I believe we have in the criminal justice system. And lastly, I would say there has to be a greater level of coherence between the different players in the criminal justice system, that is the prosecution and the investigation. Though leaving the prosecution independent, they must be independent, but there must be coherence in action, and due regard must be given to the right to fair trial of the accused and the right to a fair trial of the victim's family. And everybody must have their role better defined. Today, it's the lack of clarity of role that has led to imbalances over the past 150 years.
Right, sir. So, lastly, your message for our viewers, which majorly comprises of young lawyers and law students.
I think, and speaking as a lawyer practicing criminal law, I believe our constitution and the criminal justice system have fared well. They could have done better, but they've definitely fared well in a society which gained independence as late as 70 years, 70 odd years ago. We have sought to meet the challenges of our changing society and evolve with it. Legislation is a slow business. It requires a lot of contemplation and consultation. And therefore, legislation, especially in the field of criminal law and criminal procedure, must be very well thought out. Having said that, it is my belief that we must work towards evolving to have a better system. That would include, and there is right now an ongoing reconsideration and re-evaluation of the criminal justice system, from procedural law to evidentiary law to the substantive law. This was overdue because society has changed. And mere patchwork in legislation is not going to give us the answer that we require. We need to have a comprehensive view and then put in processes which must be audited on a time-bound basis, say 5 years or 10 years, maybe 10 years for a society like that. But if I frame a law today, merely because Macaulay framed the penal code, it's a damn good code, undoubtedly. But does it require reconsideration? Yes, it does, because times have changed. Fines, penalties, the classification of offenses, it requires reconsideration. I'll give you an example of 377. 377 was not originally contemplated. I'll give you another example. Sedition was not contemplated in the code. brought in later because you had certain movements against our colonial masters. And finally, sedition was kept in the law and sought to be used again and again and again, diluted by the federal court and then the Kedarnath Singh judgment. I asked myself, the First Amendment also allowed it to continue. And I asked myself this question: in a democratic republic where the rule is of the people, can an offense such as sedition, which talks about a rule of a sovereign, as in a king or a queen or an emperor or a Maharaj or a Nawab, can such a law exist in a modern democratic republic where the sovereign is you and me? And I assume you're an Indian citizen because I am.
Yes.
So these are the things we need to look at. And I would say to the young generation, don't just spend your time on social media, though a lot of them are my clients. Read, think, contemplate, give yourself time to analyze, give yourself time to review your thoughts. The problem in modern life is that we have a barrage of information, legal information, non-legal information. And as lawyers, we have to think for ourselves, we have to analyze, and we have to find the truth. We have to find what is legally and factually correct. That's what sets us apart as a profession. But for that, reading, analysis, contemplation, and avoiding the constant hum of WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, so on and so forth. Get back to the basics. And to all I say, there is increasingly a rush to the Supreme Court. Begin in the trial courts, learn original procedures, then rise up the career. India has a peculiarity that we have a top-heavy system. In all other jurisdictions, it is the original court which is the most important, where the maximum energy and talent is required. That used to be so in India earlier, now lesser so. But COVID is teaching us a lesson. In COVID, if we find, at least lawyers at the appellate level, if the trial courts don't function, where will be their opportunities and work for the higher courts, whether the High Court or the Supreme Court? So these are things I want you to think about. I just want you to, I'm leaving you with a bunch of thoughts, and I'll leave your listeners and viewers with that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's very well said, sir. And it was an insightful session. And thanks a lot for sparing time for us from your extremely busy schedule, sir.
My pleasure, Rita.
Thank you.